Portion of this video is sponsored by NordPass. What are you doing?
Hi, John. Hi. You guys are here early. That's good.
So when you said you had to borrow these for like work reasons, this was probably not what I was expecting.
I mean, this is work, and these are reasons, I guess.
Okay, but it's time to give them back.
Okay, that's fair. But just so you're not mad, look at this picture of this puppy.
Aww. I have a soft spot in my heart for puppies and folding phones, and I've been eating good recently on both accounts. And you look at the whole world of foldable phones. It's a world that is growing. You got flippies, you got foldies, you got all kinds of different stuff. When it comes to traditional folds, I think you generally have like two different routes. You got what Samsung is doing, putting emphasis on the inner screen with a taller, sort of narrower outer screen. Then you got what Google is doing and what OnePlus is trying to do, have a more traditional feeling phone on the outside and then sort of a different aspect ratio on the inside. And I think that alone sort of typifies the beauty of Android. Like, you got choice. You like a tall and narrow boy, they got you covered. You like maybe a shorter squatter gentleman, OnePlus and Google are there to welcome you with open arms. But I wanted to compare these two foldables because I think that right now they are amongst the best in the industry. And looming over all of this, of course, is a Pixel Fold. But comparing three phones is too hard in one video. So give the video a thumbs up if you want to see the Pixel Fold come in and battle the winner here. But looking at both of these phones, I definitely have a preference, and it might be a bit surprising. Generally, I start with cameras, and I'm gonna get to cameras a lot. When it comes to a foldable, the first thing that jumps out at me is how does this thing feel in my hand, right? That's foldable, it's usually a little bit weird. There's a hinge, and you got two screens stacked on top of each other, and you hold both these in your hand, and you're like, oh, the OnePlus is definitely lighter than the Z Fold, and that's great. And the width of the OnePlus is similar to that of a regular, kind of just normal rectangle phone, and that's awesome. But when I look at both of these, I still have a hard time with the outer screen of the Z Fold5. The tall and narrowness of it is tough. The outer screen is a 23:1:9 aspect ratio. It might not mean much to you, but it is just this and that. It's usable, and it's certainly gotten better over the years, but trying to sort of use your thumb to get to the top left or down to the bottom right is hard. You open it up, you got a beautiful 5:6 aspect ratio. For a lot of people is perfect. But then I look at what OnePlus is doing, and it's a 20:9 outer screen. It feels right, it looks right, and I prefer the way that phone uses. In fact, I was using the outer screen a lot more than I ever used on the Z Fold5. But it's a foldable, the inner screen is what matters. When I open it up, that inner aspect ratio, I love so much of the OnePlus. It feels more natural. It feels better to me. It's more usable for multitasking. What's impressive about these screens is the brightness is stupid bright. Like, you need sunglasses level bright for a foldable. 2800 nits in peak brightness is insane. But when I take these phones outside and hold them side by side, I don't really notice as much as I expected to. It's nice to know that it's there, but it wasn't like a night and day difference. So everything here spec-wise is screaming OnePlus is the better quality screen. Then you forget that the screens are made by Samsung in the Z Fold5, and Samsung does screens so well. So despite having less nits, despite what I consider to be less useful aspect ratios, the screen quality of both displays is much better than what OnePlus is doing. I don't think it's subjective even at this point. I think if you look at both of these, they are objectively better displays. Foldables are a lot of things. Cheap is not among them. Samsung's been making foldables now. They're on their 5th generation. They've done a really nice job with the durability of their phones, with the hinge of their phones. And if there's any difference from the Z Fold 4 to the 5, you could see it in the hinge. There's less moving parts, there's less gap in the middle, less place for dirt to get in. Samsung's foldables have gotten better year over year because they've had time to improve them. And beyond that, if I ever break my Samsung phone, there's a Samsung store about an hour away I can take this to. I could have peace of mind that I can get this fixed. OnePlus it's their first foldable, but kind of not really. If you look at the, say, the OnePlus Open versus the Oppo Find N3, you'll find, say, for software, these are identical phones. So I think it's fair to say this is kind of OnePlus's third iteration of the foldable, despite them never having a foldable before. And because of that, things you'd expect from a first generation phone are not here. Again, the hinge is awesome. Same as the Z Fold5, almost a zero gap. It opens well with resistance, it closes with a snap. I don't know how it's gonna hold up over time. I also have a bit of a worry what happened if something broke on it. We've had some reports that these screens are maybe not as durable as people had hoped. It's a bit more tricky to get these phones fixed, but I do think what OnePlus has done for, let's call it their like fake first outing, is really, really good. And the build quality of at least my phone feels absolutely outstanding. Plus it's got a profile switcher on it. I love that. More profile switchers on all the things. It's a tiny little thing that I use more than I expected. I really like it. There are some confusing bits about it too. Lack of wireless charging is among them. I mean, at this point, it's the end of 2023. It's strange. OnePlus did say it was to keep down size and weight, but I'm gonna assume that every other phone manufacturer tried to keep down size and weight and still put wireless charging in their phones. OnePlus has had an interesting relationship with wireless charging in the past, so it's not like completely surprising, but I do think it's unfortunate. I use wireless charging all the time to charge all of my things. It does charge up very fast though if you do plug it in. But personally, I'd rather take wireless charging over insane fast charging speeds, but that's kind of just me here. And Samsung, in classic Samsung fashion, packs pretty much every feature you can think of into the Z Fold5. You've got S Pen compatibility, of course you got wireless charging, you have fast charging, fast wireless charging, and a ton more. But they also like share a lot of the same stuff. They both have a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, a big battery, it's all there. If you ask me, and not that you are asking me, what one feature I wish foldables would have in next generation, I would say first facial recognition, but we know that's not happening. In-screen fingerprint readers on the front and even on the foldable side inside. I would love to have that make an appearance on some generation of foldables. All right, so that's like all the hardware stuff. Samsung clearly does a better job with the screen, but each phone did a surprisingly nice job with the hinge, nearly zero gap close, build quality, certain feel in the hand is really good on both. But for me, I'm gonna give the slight edge in this category, and ever so slight, to the OnePlus Open because I love that aspect ratio so much about the outer and the inner screens. Now the caveat is a question about like the long-term durability of those screens on the OnePlus. But for me right now, OnePlus takes it on hardware. But I think what matters more specifically with foldables is with software is better designed for those foldy boys. I talked a lot about how I use these phones, but these are more than just like entertainment tools. Like these are like legit how I run my business. It runs through these phones. And one of the ways I keep my business, my information on my devices safe, coincidentally, is with this video's sponsor, NordPass. If you already know that you want to try NordPass, and you probably should, here's actually a free 3-month trial, nordpass.com/John Rettinger. All the information you need will be in the description. But if you don't know what NordPass is, it is a password manager. And if you are struggling to not only remember passwords, to share passwords, trying to figure out what your credit card numbers are to get them into a website, NordPass has made that really easy, not just for me, but especially for my business. I'm able to share passwords very easily, share them fully encrypted, make sure they are safe. People don't have to worry about if I'm available to give them a password or reset a credential. They just know that it is going to work. But cybersecurity has been all over the news. And with different employees and having passwords maybe not being as secure, or maybe being cavalier with how they share passwords or what documents they open up, it keeps me up at night knowing that everything we've got here could potentially be hacked. Fortunately, NordPass helps me sleep at night. Everybody knows what password managers are at this point, but what matters with the password manager is it's going to be reliable, it's going to be secure, it's going to work, and it's going to be scalable. And NordPass knocks all of those out of the park. If you want to try it, and I think you definitely should, because there's no risk, they're going to give you 3 months free trial. Just use the John Rettinger activation code. Go to nordpass.com/John Rettinger. All the information you need will be in the description. So one of the biggest reasons I think to want a folding phone is because the screens fold, obviously, right? But not just to look at, to actually use. And folding phones are multitasking powerhouses. And for the longest time, Samsung has just been the king with multitasking abilities. With the Open though, I think OnePlus stepped up what they're calling sort of open canvas. Essentially what it's doing is giving you a lot more flexibility with multitasking. It's extending apps beyond a display. It's giving you a lot of control. Both these phones are really multitasking powerhouses, but I do give OnePlus credit for not just essentially, copying Samsung's homework and multitasking the exact same way. These both can multitask very similarly if you just, as far as apps that are open. When I reviewed the Pixel Fold, I was relatively tough on it for a big reason that I couldn't control the home screen layout on the outer screen separately from the home screen layout on the inner screen. Samsung lets me control both screens separately, and that's awesome. OnePlus does not. I didn't like it on the Pixel Fold, and I don't like it on the OnePlus. I think for me, having separate screen layouts or different things are awesome. For example, on my home screen, I've got dials and quick access things really easily when the phone is closed. I don't need that when the screen is open. It's a different use case for both, and I wish OnePlus gave us that option. Samsung's been at software for so long. You could spend hours going through granular settings of things that these phones can do. In fact, I'm still learning settings that these phones have that I've been missing. I don't know if they're new or maybe I just missed them for years. But Samsung nails the software so incredibly well. Not to say OnePlus is not, but being able to multitask incredibly well, control both screens, I think Samsung has done a really good job with the software here. The software category clearly goes to Samsung. So like I said, usually I start with camera, but there's so much more to talk about with foldables than the camera. And the camera kind of seems to be an afterthought for a lot of these companies. But if you turn the Open around, you can see OnePlus is taking cameras very seriously. It's always made me laugh every time I picked up the OnePlus Open. It doesn't really impact how I feel the phone. What it does kind of give you is almost like a pop socket while you're holding it. I found myself just resting my hand underneath the camera, which I know is super dangerous for a phone that costs this much money. But you can use it for something. I wish it wasn't as large and as round as it is, but I do think it serves a purpose. So the main camera, you're gonna get a 48 megapixel stacked sensor, telephoto, which is gonna be 64 megapixel and 3x optical with 1/2-inch sensor size, and ultra wide is 48 megapixel with 114-degree field of view, and again, 1/2-inch sensor size. On the Z Fold5, on the main camera, it's a 50 megapixel sensor. Telephoto is 10 megapixel, 3x optical. Ultra wide is 12 megapixels. Here's what surprised me about the cameras. As much time and effort as Samsung spends on their foldables, they seem to just grab last year's camera parts and slap it on their foldables. These are last year's cameras. And they were good last year. These are not bad cameras, but if you were to sort of knock one thing about what Samsung's doing with their foldables, it would probably be the cameras. These aren't even the cameras that were out on the S22 Ultra. These weren't the best of the best cameras last year. They're still good. And the things that people like about Samsung photos are still here. Look at these photos side by side. If you like punchy colors, you like high contrast, you're gonna think this is a fine camera. It's not a photographer's camera. This camera system's fine. What surprised me was what OnePlus was doing. And the big camera bump on the back pays off because the camera here is great. You look at the photos that you get from the OnePlus Open, and they don't have those bright poppy colors. And I bet if you show these pictures to a lot of people, they will pick the Samsung because it looks bright. But what this photo actually looked like is exactly what the OnePlus captured. I kind of view this as a camera system for maybe photographers and a camera system for just general consumers. And that is a big difference here. You get a lot more versatility with what OnePlus is doing. Having the macro, for example, is really nice to have, although I probably won't use it that often after the demonstrations that I had here. Having a 6x zoom versus 3x is a gigantic difference. I try not to mess around too much with digital zoom, but I use zoom all the time. That is a really useful feature, and that's a feature that I look for when picking a phone, what's going to give me the most zoom. I was really surprised with what OnePlus has done. They have a partnership with Hasselblad, and you can make the argument that Hasselblad will allow their name to be on any phone that pays them, but the photos do look much more real to life. They're not as saturated, they're not as poppy like I said, and I think for this one, for a lot of people, it's going to be a toss-up which one you prefer. I don't mind the poppy, punchy colors of Samsung at all, actually. In fact, for a lot of stuff that I put on social media, I prefer that. My decision came down to just which is going to give me the more zoom. So camera systems on a table, I'm picking up the OnePlus. I mean, listen, both of these are clearly incredible phones. I switched to Android to use the Z Fold5. I have a soft spot in my heart for what Samsung is doing, and if you're evaluating these phones just based on the screen quality, Samsung would have run away with this. But there's a lot more to these phones than just what the quality of the display is, and it was surprisingly almost a sweep for OnePlus. I love the aspect ratio. I love the way this phone feels in my hand. I love the way I can use this phone for multitasking. I wish it wireless charged. I wish it had in-screen fingerprint reader. I wish I can control both screens separately. But all those faults aside, the experience of using this phone, I really enjoyed. And I have the rare opportunity to pick and choose what phones I use. And this is a phone that I've enjoyed using when I've decided to pick up and continue using. If you're deciding which foldable to get and you hadn't considered the OnePlus Open, I think you owe it a shot.